You're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social magazine that's broadcast in English and Persian via New Channel TV. Hello everyone, I'm مریم Namazi.
And I'm Fariborz Puya. In this week's program, we'll be interviewing Lawrence Krauss, physicist, on origins of universe and things from nothing.
We'll also be talking about the appointment of Saudi Arabia to the Human Rights Council and a kiss without borders, a fatwa against sport analysts, as well as censorship by the Warwick University Student Union. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this program. The UN has appointed a representative from, guess where, Saudi Arabia, to head, yes, to head the UN Human Rights Council.
That's end of UN Human Rights Council credibility. What's the point?
I would think so.
What's the point of appealing to United Nations Human Rights Council for violation of human rights? Because the head of that organization is from Saudi Arabia, who doesn't respect any human rights. Slightest dissent in that country is not accepted. Rauf Badawi in prison for tweeting and writing a blog. And I mean, this is end of human rights. And I think you wonder why human rights in the world is in such a miserable state.
I mean, what's interesting is this council has, I think, lost credibility for many years now. They've had Sudan, they've had the Islamic regime of Iran, and now, of course, Saudi's already been a member of it, and now they're just heading it. And, you know, now they're going to be able to appoint key officials in the human rights arena. So, you know, another key official will be the Islamic Republic of Iran. You'll have the Sudanese government, hopefully, and of course, ISIS, you never know.
They'll appoint ISIS for the to head women's rights in international. This is crazy. I think that's end of. I mean, you know, suddenly you'll see that these institutions are not going to be any use for human rights, and human rights defenders need to stay outside this organization. Unless the United Nations cleans up its act, has no credibility as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you've got, I mean, you mentioned Raif Badawi, who's in prison. You've got a young man who is sentenced to crucifixion for being in demonstrations.
I wonder the head of the United Nations Human Rights has anything to say about that.
Well, I guess in a sense you could say that Saudi Arabia does represent a form of human rights. It's called Islamic human rights.
Or non-human rights.
Exactly, yeah. And now the other thing in the news, of course, is that Warwick University's Student Union has denied permission to the Warwick Atheist and Secularist and Humanist Society to have me go and speak there.
And this seems to be a running sort of theme in the universities, in UK universities, that I think they've actually been influenced, under the influence of the Islamist groups, as well as the pro-Islamist left, and they've got this notion of, you know, nobody can criticize Islamist or, you know, aspects of Islam because that might upset people. The whole point of debate and university, the whole point of university is to go and explore different ideas. It doesn't matter how outrageous it is. To explore the ideas and learn. I think, and the student union to stop that, I think is silly.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they have said is that the president of student union has said that he was concerned about Muslim students being intimidated and discriminated against. And, you know, basically what that's saying is that if I speak in defense of rights, including the rights of Muslims to dissent, the rights of ex-Muslims not to be killed for leaving Islam, then it's a form of discrimination and intimidation against Muslims. Well, that president of the student union has a very low opinion of Muslims.
And also, you know, it's interesting that there seems to be a double standard. A.C. Grayling was speaking at Warwick University recently.
Yeah.
On the issue of.
Did he not discriminate and intimidate the Christian students?
Because he talked about he talked about atheism,
and
human
humanism,
rights, and humanism. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I think this is they have a thing to come their way. Clearly, the press has picked it up, rightly so. I think this is a great concern, and I think my advice to the student union is to immediately retract that position, because it's not a good position for for a student union to have.
I mean, one of the other things too is the fact that there is this conflation taking place. I mean, we've talked about it many times before, of between Muslims as a people who are not a homogeneous group of people. They have many different forms of and opinions and thinkers and class politics and everything going on in the group that's labeled Muslim. I mean, we're included in that group as well very often. There are atheists and socialists and everything in that group, and conflating that with Islam, so that even if you criticize an idea, it's seen to be discriminatory. And of course, conflating people with fascists. It's like saying every British person is a fascist because of the English Defence League. Effectively, they're saying every Muslim is a fascist because Islamists don't like me to be on the campus.
I mean, that's the issue. Islamists and Islamist supporters within the so-called anti-war movement, we know who they are. And I think we need to put an end to this saga in British universities.
Yeah, well, I think there has been an uproar over this issue, and hopefully it will mean that sooner than later I'll be able to go and speak there. But again, I think it raises some very fundamental issues about what is the role of universities, a place for free thought and discussions and debates, and also how far are we going to allow Islamists to actually decide who can and who cannot go on universities, Islamists and their supporters.
And the narratives, I think that's important. That's the Islamist narrative.
Yeah. A prominent scholar, Islamic scholar, and you must take note of the word prominent because that's what comes before his name in every news report on him. His name is Sheikh Mohammed Saleh Al-Monajid from Saudi Arabia. And he's issued a fatwa, a very important one that you should all take note of, which is that if you're a sports analyst, well, you should be banned.
Because analysing sports stops people from paying attention to religion.
And that's all you need to be
and
doing.
You'll be happy as well because you are sort of following teams and see how they compete. That's not good. Saying Ronaldo is, it's not good.
Yeah, because I guess anything that brings you happiness and joy is just no.
Well, he's got history of, a bit of history behind him.
Yes, he's the one you were telling me, of course, that he's the one who issued a fatwa against Mickey Mouse. He actually said Mickey Mouse should die because he brings corruption.
Did somebody tell him that it's a character?
Yeah, it's not real Mickey Mouse. Okay. And he also is the one who issued a fatwa against building snowmen.
Because the snowmen don't have any souls and you shouldn't...
No, because you're not supposed to build anything that looks like a person because then you have souls.
I see.
You're representing souls. You can only do trees. And he's even given a list of things you can make with snow, like trees and buildings and stuff like that.
He's full of it, isn't he?
He's full of it. But there are people who are, rightly saying this is ridiculous, but from a very strange position.
No, some people have said, actually, this is not against the sports. The sports in Islam is okay because Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, and his wife, they used to race each other. She was young, wasn't she?
Yes. We won't comment on that. Well, so, fatwa of the week is, for those of you who are sports analysts, be warned. Now we've got a wonderful interview with the lovely Lawrence Krauss. I met him at the Kamloops Imagine No Religion conference in Vancouver quite recently. And I think it's amazing how he does bring such, very difficult subjects. He makes them seem quite easy and quite accessible. And I guess that's one of the things about him and people like Richard Dawkins.
I agree, because when you listen to Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss, you'll see, first of all, the passion for science and sort of human thinking and looking at things differently. It's amazing. In itself is very attractive. At the same time, the idea that he discusses in terms of things from nothing, particles popping in and out of space from it's amazing. It's mind-boggling. And the questioning your thoughts and your given assumptions all the time is amazing. And so you see how much science has advanced in the last 30 days that I...
30 days.
30 years that I remember last time I
Yeah, we don't want to know about your age now, all right? Yes. But, I mean, listen to this interview now. When I heard him speak, well, when I heard the video, the interview just again before the program, I was taken with, you know, just the whole magic of reality, which is the title of a book by Richard Dawkins. It is really magic, and you don't need magic when you've got this wonderful and interesting reality. Watch this interview. Lawrence Krauss, welcome to our program. I wanted to ask you about this theory of yours that some things come out of nothing. Can you explain that?
Sure. And first, I want to make a point. It's not a theory of mine. It's just what we've learned on the basis of what we learned about the universe. So what I talk about is based on well-known physics. It's not all speculative, in fact. And so the point is that quantum mechanics tells us that when you combine quantum mechanics and relativity, they tell us that even empty space is not as empty as you think it is. Quantum mechanics says that things are fluctuating all the time. And when you add relativity in, it says something amazing, that out of empty space, particles can pop in and out of existence all the time, normally for a very short time. They're what we call virtual particles. We can't see them directly, so you might say, well, how do we know they're there? But we can measure their effects indirectly. They affect the properties of atoms in ways we can calculate and predict, and the predictions agree exactly with the observations. So we know that virtual particles are popping in and out of existence all the time. And so empty space is really a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles, which means you can't see them. But if you add gravity into the case, then when you create virtual particles, if their gravitational binding is strong enough, they can become real particles. You can see them. So empty space becomes unstable to creating real particles. If you wait long enough, you'll create particles. So out of nothing, namely empty space, you can create stuff. But even more than that, if gravity is a quantum theory, then space itself is a quantum mechanical entity, and space and time are, and they fluctuate in and out of existence too. You could literally, in every region of space, there's virtual universes that are popping in and out of existence and then quickly going out of existence. That really is happening if gravity is a quantum theory, and we have every reason to believe it is. And that means, again, it turns out, if you were to create a virtual universe, a very small region of space that had zero total energy, it could exist forever. And it turns out when we measure our universe, as far as we can tell, the total energy of our universe is zero. The positive energy of matter is countered by the negative energy of gravitational attraction. And therefore, if you were going to create a universe out of nothing and you asked what would be its properties would be precisely the properties of the universe we see. This doesn't tell us it actually happened, because we don't have a theory of quantum gravity, but it's all plausible. And the point is, we can therefore start with no space, no time, no particles, no radiation, and we can end up with a universe with 100 billion galaxies and 100 billion stars. So that supposed miracle of how you can get all the stuff out there when there was no stuff is not a miracle at all.
Let's see, yeah. So how did it all happen? What's the current knowledge on that?
Well, we don't know exactly how it happened at the beginning. We know that it's quite plausible. But we don't have a quantum theory of gravity. But as far as we can tell, all evidence tells us that our universe did begin in a microscopic state of a Big Bang. We can see the remnants of it that tell us it really happened. We can go back and test our ideas of physics back to when the universe was a millionth of a second old. But we don't yet know the physics at the very beginning. And not knowing is fine. In fact, it's a central part of science. It's what makes it different than religion, because you don't make these assertions about things you can't test, nor do you claim to have absolute knowledge. We learn about the universe, and it keeps surprising us. But the Big Bang really happened. It's not a hypothesis or a theory. We can measure so many aspects of our universe, and it was once smaller and smaller and smaller. We can't go back to t equals 0, but we can get very close.
And this whole thing of quantum theory, it's quite confusing and very weird, as people say. Why is that?
Well, quantum theory is weird, but the universe is weird, and that's okay. It's not surprising. In some sense, it's surprising that we understand anything about the universe, because the universe isn't created to please us. And moreover, we evolved in the savannah in Africa to learn how to escape lions, not to understand quantum mechanics. And so it's amazing that we've been able, with our brains, the techniques of modern science to learn enough about the universe to discover that at fundamental scales, the universe behaves in ways that appear to be crazy. But it's again, that's the case not because we want it to be the case, but because we measure and that is the case. And the universe is the way it is, whether we like it or not. And I think some people find that worrisome, but I find it incredibly exciting because it means that we can open our mind and be surprised and learn that our myopic picture of what is supposed to be the case is not always the case. It's not just true for physics, it's true for our ideas of society. What we may think myopically or right or wrong based on something that people wrote thousands of years ago, we find that now that we understand the universe better, those ideas are simply wrong.
Well, you mentioned about us being Africans. How is that?
Well, it turns out we now know that modern Homo sapiens evolved out of Africa. A different group of early modern hominids called Neanderthals probably left earlier, and then we came out later out of Africa, and we can now begin to date these things. Around 40,000 years ago, we entered what is now modern Europe and also propagated out through Asia, what is now Persia and Asia, and then all the way through to Australia. And we can see that, in fact, the Neanderthals disappeared about the same time we emigrated out, Homo sapiens, and that strongly suggests that perhaps we got rid of